Okay, well, we're back.
Welcome to part two. We have our different lighting this time. This is innie or outie lighting.
Outie,
It's outie lighting.
innie, I don't know.
Just a different time of day. Where did we leave off? We started getting into them character by character, and we talked, I think, pretty comprehensively about Mark's storyline,
Yeah,
where we both felt like, okay, cool, the reintegration piece of how do these two sides of them, how are they going to coexist through this like very involved surgical procedure that's dangerous in all these ways. We felt like the creators kind of dropped that ball, and then of course they bring it back in a very, what can I say, striking way in the final episode where they actually have his innie and outie use cutting edge camcorder technology. Uh, I remember camcorders; they were very exciting back in the day. To have a conversation with himself, which is a cool idea. But by the time it happened, for some reason, I was underwhelmed by that scene, even though I was like excited by the premise and it went on for a long time. It was what, 13 minutes long of back and
yeah.
forth with himself. How did you feel about that?
Well, I just feel like, in some ways, the whole season or even the whole show is about Mark's outie and Mark's innie and the relationship between the two. And to give them just that kind of, I don't know, I guess I was looking for something a bit more exciting and a bit more dramatic and um less like obvious, where it's just like they're just like telling each other their thoughts. Like
Yeah,
it just felt a bit too direct.
bit on the nose. Yeah, I found it
Yeah.
interesting, and it was one of these moments that gave Adam Scott some real, I mean, a really great acting exercise
Yeah.
for sure, because the subtle differences between them and the differences in lighting, like it was a cool scene. But for me, the finale episode, it's tough for me to assess it on its own because it is the capper to a full season. And so the weaknesses of the season earlier and the ways that the real estate got allocated to certain storylines above others affected how satisfying I found the finale to be.
Yeah.
I wanted to like it more than I did.
Totally. And also, please let us know if you agree or disagree with us in the
Oh,
comments.
they will.
I'm always curious. I've been on Reddit threads a lot about Severance and just following people's perspective. But yeah, we covered a lot in part one, and let's just pick up where we left off. I
Sure.
would love to hear more about your take around Helly and Helena and that character.
Yeah, no, I'm totally with you. Like I said, I think in part one, there was such an opportunity for her to feel betrayed not only by her doppelganger, Helena, who's the obvious villain, but by this guy who she thought she had a real special, intimate connection with. And she's never, keep in mind, she's never had a relationship before. She's a
That's
virgin.
true.
They're all virgins, these innies, which means you can take it in kind of one of two directions. Either they're going to be super uh, sensitive and highly attuned to whether or not the person they're interested in is really with them, very delicate. And you really saw that with Irving and Bert in the first season. Like they really nailed a kind of tentative first love, knowing that
It was
they're
a
not
slow burn, also, which
a
was,
real slow burn, a lot of flirtation. Now, Mark and Helly had flirtation in season one, it's true, and they had their kiss in season one. But in terms of how Helly, I mean, we've already been denied Helly for the first four episodes because of the big reveal that was no surprise to anyone watching the show. I mean, true, we were looking at the Reddit boards and stuff, but everyone there, I don't know if you and I would have clued in without that it was, would you have known it was Helena, not Helly? This is the
um,
problem of watching
yeah, it's,
shows in the binging streaming.
It's
8.
hard to know, honestly. I think, well, yeah, I mean, I think in that scene where, because we know Irv is a detective,
Yeah.
and because we saw Irv not really tell, like, be very cautious about what he says to her, and her kind of thing about, I saw a gardener, like, that also felt weird to me because if you were Helena, who you're going in, like, you should have had a better lie than
Hmm.
that. But that moment was just very clear. I think for me, that was a moment that was very clear. Like, okay, she can't fully be trusted.
Right.
But
But
I will say, you said, Helena's obviously the villain, but I actually didn't find it so obvious this season. I think that that was part of the flaw is that I actually don't know what Helena's motives are.
sure.
Why is it just because of her dad? Like I kind of have to assume that she's just trying to please her dad or something, but I don't actually know, like, is there something about Miss Casey and Gemma that's like Helena has a personal interest in? What is about it the company? Is it like, I feel like that part of her actually wasn't fleshed out other than like, okay, she takes a swim in the morning and she eats a hard boiled egg.
With her father watching her disappointedly.
Yeah, I didn't really actually get more about who she is as a character and why season one ended with her, kind of leading this whole public thing about Lumen. And yeah, season two kind of didn't answer like why did she choose to be so visible? Was she forced into it? Was it her decision? Like so many unanswered questions about her actual motives,
Yeah.
and it was all just centered around Mark.
Right.
And just another thing that I wanted to also say that I also read about in the Reddit threads that I
And
thought was,
and then I want to get back to what I was trying to say before.
yeah, no, just quick thing, but like season one had a lot of also about the public.
Yes.
It had the senator, it
That's
had the
right.
protests. We didn't see
Nothing.
anything, and the senator and his wife and all of that were really interesting characters.
Yeah.
You saw like people going up to Mark being like, so some way that the public was kind of more involved.
You would think that that incident would increase public pressure on Lumen, increase their visibility, increase scrutiny on them.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden Lumen is just free to do whatever they want in season 2 with it's true. I was expecting after season 1 that Lumen would have to be careful with how they proceed, but they just dispense with the tension of that entirely in episode 1 with,
Yeah.
oh, look, Severance reforms. And I guess the idea is everyone just bought it and the story went away.
Yeah, and they just assumed that we would be able to understand that it was like a private Lumen event and that it didn't make headlines, or like we kind of had to be like, okay, that was
They
that
had
the
a couple.
cliffhanger of season one wasn't actually a cliffhanger
Well,
because nothing.
if you go back and look at episode 2, I guess, when we first go to the Audis, there's a scene with the executives. Drummond, I guess, is there. Maybe Natalie Helena's there, and they take care of all that shit in just a couple of lines. So like, we
Yeah,
confiscated everyone's cell phones. We dealt with any extra footage. Like, it's just completely
underwhelming.
underwhelming, and it's undermining of the enormity of what we built up to at the end of season 1. That was my biggest issue with the first couple of episodes of this season. It was like, okay, cool. There's a lot of cans of worms that got open there. Well, we don't like too many worms, so we're gonna like throw those out. And here's some more cans of worms that we may or may not open this season. Ooh, new things to be
Yeah,
excited about and mysterious by. So, as far as Helly goes, we've missed out on the actual Helly R for the first 4 episodes. And when she comes back, Mark's acting all strange to her. And then she tells him to stop being an asshole. And he finally admits to her, okay, me and your Audi had sex. And yeah, she walks away. But we, like you said, we see her kind of crying on the floor in the hallway. And when she comes back, her main sentiment is, I want that experience for myself too. Not you fucking asshole. Now, that would then be, I think that would be a very plausible response. Anger not just at her alter ego, but at him for not recognizing that there was something off. Maybe accusing him, there was something you like about her. Like, it's so rich. And whether
yeah,
or not that's fair or not would be then an interesting question. And I think a lot of guys watching the show would have been like, well, how's he supposed to know? Whatever. And I think a lot of women watching the show would be like, actually, and maybe some guys too, you know when there's something off with your partner, and even if they think that like they're in the right because they didn't technically do anything wrong, betrayals can happen in all kinds of ways, and it's such a rich situation for that. And they just skimmed it over, and they just were just like the way. How is Helly R mollified? How's she pacified? Well, any Mark sleeps with her, and then she's fine.
Yeah, and I think there's just so much contradiction in that like, and also just weird that Mark can get with both Helly and Helena, and that's like kind of a non-issue in his psyche. Like he doesn't really have strong feelings about the fact that he slept with Helena. And it's surprising, especially given that the last episode kind of ends with this big contradiction between his innie and his outie and these different desires. And he's just like not thinking about that at all with
Right.
like he's just like, oh yeah, I slept with Helena and what like, and I think something, that we've talked about, I'm like, would have been much more interesting and much more juicy if actually Mark wasn't into Helly, if Helly was into Mark, but Mark was actually into Helena.
Right.
But there
The
was just,
aristocrat, the
yeah, like maybe there was something in him, but yeah, I think it was just something too simple and weird about him just being into both of them. And or I guess in the Audi she's kind of coming after, it was just a bit too messy, and I'm like, what's the actual plot line here?
right. And whatever the merits of what we're suggesting or what they went with, one of the effects of that is that Heliar is just in her feelings a lot this season and doesn't have much of a purpose or plan except to help Mark, be mad at Mark. She's not figuring much out on her own. And the fact that Dylan has been co opted with the loved one's visitation perk means that she doesn't have an ally in him. The fact that Irving sleuths out that Helena had taken her place and he gets basically killed off, any Irv. She's got no one to talk to and nothing to do. She didn't even get to see the goat people herself because that was
That's true.
Helena. I Helena was a bit too good at playing her.
Yeah.
Like I can see some moments, but I haven't seen anything about Helena on the outside that indicates to me that she's that much of a mimic, that
Well,
much of
but
an
that's the
improv
thing, is
artist.
that like
Like
we actually don't know that much about Helena on the
everything we know
outside.
on the outside is that she's a stiff ice queen.
And I just like, I'm still confused. Like, is she actually just doing this because she's controlled by her dad, or does she have her own motives in it? Like, I actually don't know.
Yeah.
But I will say one of the most powerful moments for me in the season was when Irv outed her
Mm,
and was like, Helly was never cruel.
mm,
I thought that was like a really potent line. And I mean, I think Irv's character is really, really strong. And I thought that that was also interesting, especially kind of towards the end where Helly's like wanting to actually, trying to convince Dylan, like, look at what Irving left you. And I thought there was a really interesting connection there between Irv and Helena that could have also been more drawn out.
yeah, I agree. That plot line, it both lasted too long and not long enough. It just ended up being kind of a nothing. Like dragging it out over 4 episodes when most of us had already clued in
Mhm.
feels like a waste of time. But at the same time, the fact that it got resolved so quickly in the season, where do you go from there? And I think where you have to go from there is to really think about one of your greatest characters, Helly, and how she would
Yeah.
react. And we just didn't get, we didn't get enough of that. And then at the end, she makes the decision to team up with Mark and help him. And then, she I don't know, she entices him back at the very last minute and he chooses Mark chooses her over leaving to go let his Audi have his wife. And there's a lot of people theorizing that, oh my God, the look she gave Gemma at the very end means that was Audi
The
Helena
cruelty.
again. And to me, that was such evidence that the whole reveal and the plot at the beginning was just a waste. Because if you think that they could just bring that back, the actors have denied that that's what it is, although who knows what that means. But like, if it's so if it's such a simple thing to have Helena, they're kind of interchangeable,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of a cheap device.
Yeah, I thought the kind of closing scene of like Mark having to choose between two women was just kind of weak in a way, but also something that I was just thinking about that, that I thought might, hopefully in season 3, a way to kind of make it more interesting is because Audi's Mark, his experience was having Gemma killed, kidnapped by Lumen, how whatever it was to him at that time, and kind of the grief and the loss of that. And it's interesting because Innie Mark is like in some ways being like, no, I don't want to listen to Audi Mark. I'm different from him. But it could be interesting if then Helly is killed slash kidnapped by Lumen. So then Innie Mark actually is thinking that he's not Audi Mark, but has the same experience that Audi Mark was, trying to communicate to him about. And that's the only way that I could find that interesting. If there's something like that Innie Mark can't escape Audi Mark in a way,
Some kind of parallel
like
that
repetitive
puts him
pattern or something.
in his own shoes. Um, yeah. So anyway,
But
Helena, Helly, not you know, yeah. I think uh, we missed what we loved about Helly R, and what we were given in terms of Helena didn't give us enough of a sense of who this woman is to fully invest.
yeah, and Helly just felt like a side character.
Yeah, I agree.
Like everything was about Mark.
Yeah.
Mark became it's like Mark, 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 and it's like
Mark.
yeah,
So let's look at some of the other characters. So the rounding out the top four, right? Our original four. They didn't really feel like a foursome in this episode, this season, and I think that's a valid choice, but you're taking away one of the core, essential, beautiful things about the show, which was that ensemble of four actors and four characters. So let's look at Dylan next. To me, Dylan's storylines were my favorite this season. I thought he got, you know, kind of shortchanged by the writers' emphasis on the Mark, Gemma, Helly triangle and all that. But it's so funny because I don't know how you feel, but every single theme that they were trying to bring out with Mark, Helly, Gemma, all that, not every single theme, but many of them are actually captured really well in the Dylan Gretchen plotline, the love triangle between his innie, his outie, and her.
yeah,
And she's not severed, so she's a constant between the two. The
mm,
affair, or the emotional affair, I guess, very innocent little one, but still in the context of their marriage, a big deal. It's 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 life sized, it's human sized,
very relatable.
very relatable. It's also working class because he's the one character that we know, you know, they don't live an extravagant lifestyle. She's a, I don't know, night shift paramedic.
Yeah,
And he's doing this job because he can't do anything else because he's depressed. They got two kids. You can see the circumstances they're living in. He tries to get a job at another place. That weird, funny scene with
yeah,
the,
that was like the only outside public thing we really saw. That's like someone new
that's
and
right. Yeah,
out in the
I thought
world.
we were going to get more of that this season. But so anyway, that creates the pressure of I need this job to work.
Yeah,
And and so the what I'm saying is the tension, the competition between his innie and his outie for the love of someone else is there. Even the dialogue between his innie and his outie happens in the same episode with a lot more efficiency than Mark's 13-minute back and forth camcorder conversation. The letter he writes to himself,
yeah,
that his outie writes to his innie. The acting by both of them,
yeah.
by Zach Cherry and Merritt Weaver, who is just a great addition to the cast, perfectly in this world.
Well, she's an example of a new character that actually was a good choice
Yeah,
because the new character allowed for a deepening of a
an
already
existing character.
existing
Yeah,
character. I think, and you could argue maybe Miss Wong and Milchick or whatever, but no, or
you could have deepened Milchick with Drummond.
Yeah, that's true. Um, yeah, and I think there was definitely something
and Natalie.
like Dylan's character was really, really strong.
So great, you know, and the only thing I didn't like is that I thought it was a little too easy for Milchick to co-opt him. Like again, by the end of episode one, I'm already getting signs that he's not going to be so loyal to his three buddies, which again, season one built us up to this extreme act of solidarity.
Yeah, and that's the thing that it's like it almost didn't even matter if Dylan was had their back or not. Like it actually made no impact on the team.
That's right.
Which is part of it's like then why kind of seduce Dylan with that when yeah, I just feel like it actually had no impact on Mark.
It didn't have much impact on Mark. You know, Dylan and Irving had a few good scenes together in the
Yeah.
early episodes, maybe episode three. Um, but again, they were both so neutered by the exigencies of the new season two plot that neither of them was up to much. Irving was already depressed, missing
Mhm.
missing Bert. Dylan is now completely focused on the wife thing.
Yeah.
But once we get into the visitations, those every single one of those scenes, whether it was at home with his Audi or at work with his innie, uh, and it's a weird idea that they're just going to let visitors down to the severed floor. Like at first, I was like, "What?" But they made it work,
Hmm.
and just the acting and the writing in those scenes, very economical, and contained every theme and the romantic aspect that they spent so much more time with diminished effect, diminished human relatability on
Yeah.
Mark and Helly.
Yeah, it's almost like I was more invested in Dylan and Gretchen's relationship almost because it felt more real
Mhm.
than Mark and Helly or Mark and Helena or Mark and Gemma.
By far more than Mark and
Like
Joan.
I could feel them way more
Yeah.
than I could like these other love stories felt a bit like look, we're just showing like not to go back to Helly, but just Helly and Mark's sex scene under the table. I found that so uninteresting, especially
Completely.
when there were so many other plot lines to develop and it was just like yeah, it just felt very, very strange. And I actually didn't feel the relationship deepen, you know, in the way that I felt with Dylan and Gretchen. Like I really felt Dylan's heart
Yeah.
and I felt his heartbreak. And with Mark and Helly, I actually didn't really feel like there were some episodes where I was like, you know, I knew that Helly was kind of into Mark, but because, you know, she kissed him at the end of season one, but I guess it wasn't so clear like when he started developing like it just all of a sudden was like yeah he likes her too you know but like I don't know I didn't see that more kind of slow development and being invested more in it.
What's the first place that, you know, that famous running scene from the season opener in season two, which again, that running scene to me, I had a sort of a subtle oh feeling. I'm like, wow, I really noticed that was hard to shoot. Like that was my thinking. I'm like, wow, they really shot that. They did that really well. But I was not. It was not transparent craft. It was very the craft was right in my face because I story wise it wasn't. I guess it was a mystery. Where is he running? Well, where was he running? He wasn't running to go find Helly. He was going to the wellness room to try and find Miss Casey.
Yeah, and
And
that's
and
where it's
and
like
and why if any Mark is that invested at the top of the season in his Audi's wife's uh, whereabouts, then what's the journey? We're back to Mark again. We were supposed to be
we
talking
always go
about
back
Dylan.
to Mark. No, but yeah, like I guess it wasn't so clear like what really shifted in him that all of a sudden like he slept with Helena and then he's just like comes back and it just feels like a very
The sex
drastic
was just that good.
it just feels like a very drastic shift like
Yeah.
and then he's like no well I don't really care about Miss Casey I don't know her then it's like well but why was he like it's just it's
Yeah.
a bit too not flushed out.
Right. So Dylan was just an example of someone who really felt like they kept that what made that character great alive from the second season. They expanded his world.
Yeah,
They gave him some new emotional challenges.
they deepened it.
They deepened it. What about Irving? Tough season
He's
for
my
Irv.
favorite.
Yeah, he's my
I
favorite.
wanted to see so much more of him.
Yeah.
And yeah, and radar also, which is funny because that's what usually, like when you type out my name, it autocorrects to radar.
I'm
So I like to see some of my autocorrect representation on
gonna call you
screen.
Radar from now on.
um, yeah, no, I mean, I think it's like, okay, so like I thought it was really cool how he had like this dream world, and right, a lot of what we saw in season 1 was like the paint, and the paint kind of coming into the dream world, and he's calling someone on the payphone, maybe what's her name,
Ragabi,
Ragabi.
but never any confirmation of that.
Never confirmation of that, but clearly he's on some reintegration journey as well. And I just really loved also like the mystical vibes of it, of like an artist and dream world.
And maybe a former army veteran,
Yeah,
which I thought was going to be much more. We learned
right.
very
Yeah, like
little more about his Audi.
like what happened to him
What
that
happened to
was
him?
so trauma. Yeah, I think that actually would have been really interesting to learn more about.
Yeah,
And does he have anyone else in his Audi life?
that's right.
Like he's just always alone in
Yeah,
the Audi, other than obviously with radar.
yeah, and his entire reason for being in season 2, other than his heroic act of outing Helena, is to find Bert, meet Bert, have sort of a weird, creepy, pleasant dinner with him and his husband Fields, which to me was a bit overwritten, and then we have this, and then Drummond is
Yeah.
infiltrating his place at the same time, and now
Well,
Bert, now Bert is
you're
kind of spooky.
yeah, you're just making me think of like how every character in some ways was like struck by Cupid.
Yep.
Like all of a sudden everyone became like googly eyed or like
Well, and
lovesick
when you
and
at when you look on the internet, like the consensus seems to be, what's Severance about? It's about the question, does love transcend severance?
yeah, which I
Which
don't.
which to me is like, first of all, that's such a circular, self-referential question.
Well, it's also like season 1 wasn't about
It was
love.
not about love whatsoever.
And it's just like it's fine to maybe if you want to make season 2 just to be about love, but then you actually have to invest more in love. Like it just felt like the love wasn't as earned. Like Irv and Bert were earned in season 1, but
Yeah.
in this season,
Well, they had a beautiful scene in episode 9
yeah,
at the
fair.
train station. But after a bunch of diversion and decoy and like making
Yeah.
us think that Bert is, gonna kill him or whatever. And then
Well,
they have this lovely goodbye, but I'm like, where, like, that my whole feeling in episode 9 was, where has this show been all season?
yeah. And I think just going back to some of the earlier episodes with Irv, it's like, okay, what do we know about him? He's a detective. He's been investigating Lumen for a long time. And yeah, I guess I was also kind of curious to understand, like to get more insight
Is
about
he a
that.
detective, or is he just a guy who's trying to solve a mystery?
Well, but that's exactly the thing. The reason, like, we're unclear because that plot line hasn't been developed.
No.
Season 1 ended with they're all of them kind of waking out in their Audis, and then like so little was done
Yeah.
with that, other than Mark, of course. But like, yeah, I wanted to understand more of Irving's Audi
Yeah.
life and why he was getting reintegrated and just a bit more depth. And
Well,
also,
hold on. You think Irving was actually getting reintegrated?
well, it seems that way with the paint and all. Remember, all the black stuff would come out. And,
Yeah, but I don't think he was going through the same, any kind of actual reintegration process, which begs the question, what was the paint about?
right. Well, I mean, I think it was. I mean, maybe not the same process as Mark. Who knows if he was talking to Ragabi or not? But
It
clearly,
suggests,
when he had that dream,
right. Well, it
that
suggests that,
wasn't his. That wasn't his any consciousness. Like he's been at the very least, trying to have access to greater consciousness outside of his
yeah.
innie.
What does he say on the payphone? My innie got the message.
Yeah. Right, which kind of it's he's clearly playing. He's trying to communicate to his innie. If it's like full on reintegration, whatever, we don't know. But like, or he's like painting, this black hole, and
And how does that sketch of it get down to the severed floor?
I think he with a woman who was Bert's coworker. He shows it to her.
Yeah, but how is it that he does he do you remember how he got it down there?
Actually, I don't
Because
remember.
don't they have a
I think he
filtering
might.
system
I
for
think he might
images?
have created it while he was an innie, which I think is part of why he was like doing this visual, which is also really interesting because if that's actually what's happening with Irv, and if Mark, like the fact that Irv and Mark are both in some ways doing this innie outie communication, but they're not at all having any relationship to each other was weird.
Yeah, whereas for him the lines are
Like,
blurring. I guess when his innie woke up in his Audi's house, he saw the paintings.
right? Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
And I think, yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, it also felt like there was a split of just like, okay, well, now Irv and Dylan and Helly and Mark. And I'm like, but why can't Mark and Irv interact more?
Yeah.
And,
It almost felt like John Turturro said to them, like, I'm only available for this many days, guys. Write me out. Now,
no, I don't think
I
that
don't
was,
think that's true at all, but it felt that way. It
yeah,
felt like they were underusing him
they were
because they couldn't
definitely
afford
underusing
him or something. Like, because he's just there's such gold in him, both
yeah,
dramatically and comedically.
he's a great character.
Um, I didn't like the dinner episode with him, and
What didn't you like about it?
I just didn't get the sexual politics of it with the husband being like, "Do you think you slept together?" And the,
So just to say, it was like so weird. Like, why does Bert know that information? Oh, like they told me that I had a sexual thing with someone. Like, so weird that he would know that, and he would just say that to Irv, and especially if Irv's a detective and Bert's been, kind of sending people off through Lumen. Like, it just felt like there was a bit way too much trust from the beginning
yeah,
that just also felt confusing, especially given that Irv is a detective. And the fact that not that to say that he should have seen it coming, that, they would break into his house and all of that, but like, I don't know. And I guess it just maybe wasn't flushed out. I was confused if he was going into the dinner as a detective or as someone who's potentially interested in a love thing.
side note, uh, we see the moment where Innie Irv basically loses his life and he switches back to Audi Irv, the last shot of episode 4, Woes Hollow. They're still there. His coworkers are just like down the path.
Right.
He's
And
not all the way into the woods yet.
what happens?
Who comes and grabs him and puts him in a van and takes him away from there? Like, how do they explain that to him?
Yeah, and also you're reminding me. Remember, Milchick was like, "It's as if you have never existed,"
Hmm.
and there were some theories of like, "Oh, the memory of him will even be wiped out." But clearly, that's just not true. Like
Yeah,
the innies remembered him.
yeah,
But yeah, you're right. There was just like, okay, now he's not an innie anymore, and that's like what was happening
yeah.
and what.
Did he
Yeah,
explain his firing to Burt and Fields? Because this is the
I
second
can.
time he's been fired,
Yeah,
and it just doesn't seem to be affected by that. He's not any more suspicious than he was.
yeah,
He's not devastated. He's not any more motivated.
yeah.
There's just a lack of motivation in this season outside of like the most motivated person in the season is Ragabi.
Right.
Like she's the one bringing the
And then she
urgency and
also
the
just
intensity, and
disappears.
then she just fucks off and disappears.
I just feel like there's too many people just randomly disappearing. It's like, okay,
Yeah,
this plot line got too intense, so goodbye.
yeah, for sure.
And I'll say about the dinner conversation with Bert and Fields, like, I think they, in some ways, had that also to talk about religion and bring kind of this whole conversation about religion and sin and innocence and all this stuff. Which, on some level, I think is clearly an underlying theme in Lumen, that it's in some ways a religious cult or something.
Yeah,
But the conversation itself, like, just didn't feel as I don't know. I couldn't quite follow, and maybe partially because I was like, what is Irv's motives for being there?
Yeah.
He doesn't. His Audi doesn't know Bert. Like their love thing isn't. And that's why it's like, yeah, on episode 9 it was like a beautiful moment on the train and it was beautifully shot and everything, but at the same time I was like, Bert, kind of not Bert, Irving kind of coming to Bert and being like, I'm ready, I'm ready, I'm ready. I'm like, that also felt very quick. How does he
Do
just
you remember that in season 1 he said I'm not ready?
right? But that's the thing, is that like his Audi doesn't have any of this memory.
Yeah.
All he knows from his Audi life is that he's a detective that's been investigating Lumen. He shows up, like this guy Bird is following him because his
Yeah.
Audi, like that he just wouldn't be more on edge, and that he's just like completely surrendered and then just gets on a train and
Also,
leaves.
there's another thing about Audi Irving that was disappointing to me. The difference personality wise between Helena and Helly, at least on paper, is clear. The difference between Audi and Mark, they've spent a long time establishing that, and the actor gets to really be a different, different personality in the same body. Audi Dylan and Innie Dylan, distinct difference. Innie Irving is such a quirky character and so prim
Yeah.
and proper and rules following that once I find out that Audi Irving is a veteran of the armed forces, has a kind of like he listens to Motorhead, Ace of Spades, this like, British heavy metal while he's like painting this dark, painting with thick oil paints. I want a bit more of a butch character. I want to get more
Mm.
of a sense of like, he wears a leather jacket, he's got his
Yeah.
dog. He just seems like it's just John Turturro. Like it's just a gentle guy. Like they didn't really write in any sense of a life from which someone would say, I want to sever myself and
Yeah,
go
that's
become
fair.
that other guy. And it's just a missed opportunity to me.
And you're also speaking that his Innie and his Audi aren't, the gap between them is not that big actually.
No, he's at dinner, he almost seems
Yeah.
like uh he's still kind of socially awkward, a little giddy.
Yeah. I mean, I guess I just thought, yeah, I thought it would be more interesting if he was full on detective at that dinner. Like maybe he's tried like a question here and there, but I almost wanted him to like corner Bert and be like, and then it could have been like some interesting, even like BDSM stuff, but like take his hands, like something, become more aggressive because, as you're speaking to, he's like, just giving him a bit more character and a bit more depth on the
Yeah.
outside by being like, tell me what you know, tell me.
Whoever he's talking to on the phone, wouldn't they be telling him, change your locks?
Yeah.
Fucking like they're gonna be after you. Anyway,
Unless
so
maybe he really is just an ordinary person that's investigating. But then, yeah, I don't know. I guess it just feels too weird that he's just like, okay, I'll just get on a train now and leave.
yeah.
Instead of, I mean, I guess in some ways, what are his options?
Well,
But
it wouldn't again, had the buildup been better and had we gotten the sense of the danger he's in, and had he been pushing more strongly, then him leaving would have been more bittersweet for more reasons than just, oh, he doesn't get to be with the man he loves or wants to love.
yeah.
It would have been like he's giving up on the chance to free his coworkers or to blow the whistle on Lumen. Like Lumen wins,
Mhm.
you know. It was just a bit soft, too soft focused.
I will say that one scene that I liked with Irv was with gosh, I keep forgetting everyone's name. With Bert's coworker, was it Patricia?
Felicia,
Felicia. I thought that was a really cute
it's
scene that
terrific.
they're like laughing, and like that's also like, just to say overall in terms of season impressions, like, they spent so much money with these like fancy outdoors retreat and this thing and that thing, but to me the gold of this show is moments like that, is
Mhm.
like dialogue between characters. Like you actually don't really need that much.
Yep.
I think I would have been so happy if so much of the season was just in that kind of Severance world on the inside, and
Yep.
so much more exchange and dialogue and relationships between people. And yeah, it overall felt very missing.
I still don't know why that doctor who was wheeling the
Oh yeah.
shopping cart was whistling Gordon Lightfoot, The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald. I noticed it right away because it's a great song, but I I don't get the connection. Um, let's move on to Milchick.
Real quick before we move on, just this is both
This is
about
more about Helen.
no about Irv and Dylan.
Okay, sure.
Which you brought up this point where it's just like, what are they doing? What are they refining at the macro? Like it
Yeah.
okay, it became clear what Mark's doing. I keep wanting to call him like Michael or Matt. I don't know why his name keeps changing up for me. But yeah, just like what are they doing?
Yeah.
Who are they? Are they also working on other people, or is it also part of Gemma's case? Or
Are they just there to fill chairs so that Mark will work?
yeah, like the work still remains very mysterious. And even if we saw the testing floor and what's happening with Gemma, like
I have a good catchphrase for, or a good sort of, what would be the word? Uh, I don't know. We could sum up season two as mysterious and unimportant. There's just too much in the season that's
yeah,
mysterious and
it's true.
unimportant. Um, People, Severance fans are going to be like, you guys hate this show.
They're gonna hate us.
Yeah, we actually don't hate it. We love the show. And we even liked a lot of this season, but
We're basically asking to be invited to the writers' room.
exactly. This is our pitch. This is our audition tape. So Milchick, who becomes, I'd say he becomes a primary character this season if he wasn't last season.
Yeah,
Like,
true.
and they did some cool things with him this season. What are your thoughts on Seth Milkshake?
Yeah. Well, I want you to start because to be honest, I don't actually have that many thoughts about him. I know he was a big character and there was a lot that was happening and it was like interesting to follow along and also I guess yeah, I mean I think you could really see his inner struggle,
Yep.
which I appreciated that there's like a character who's really struggling.
Mhm.
And I think he had some really great moments, particularly like standing up to Mr. Drummond and all of that. Um, but it just, yeah, I guess it wasn't, and maybe it's just still in development, but it's just, because sometimes on Reddit, people will be like, is he going to turn? Is he going to turn and then support Mark? And
Mhm.
it's like, well, no, but what, like, yeah, it just also wasn't so clear. And maybe this is so unrelated, but it's also like, would have been interesting to see scenes of him going out of Lumen. Like, what is he doing outside of Lumen?
Absolutely.
What's his
If you
story?
needed to have one episode devoted to how a particular Lumen employee came to work for Lumen and uh, and looking at their life outside of the Lumen framework, by far I'm much more interested in Milchick than Cobell.
Yeah.
Like the what we learn in the Sweet Vitriol episode, and I have no idea why it's called that, the one where she goes back to her hometown in like Newfoundland or whatever. Um, Everything we learn is interesting enough, but like an entire episode being devoted to it, and it's only 37 minutes long. This like mini,
You're talking about Cobell.
yeah, Cobell,
Yeah.
like just not worth the time. It's an understandable choice if it's a longer season, but it's not. And meanwhile, Milchick, they're getting at some interesting stuff. I mean, when they first introduced the portrait and I realized they were bringing race into the show, I didn't know how to feel about it. I was like, I don't know if this show has the tools to deal with this. And I'm like, oh, but we're still living in a world where race is a thing and Lumen's whiteness. I mean, it actually
Yeah.
became kind of interesting, but without any sense of like, I would love to have seen someone. Isn't there some line with Milchick and someone like, "I'll take you out for to a bar and grill sometime." Maybe he says that to Mark at some point. I would love to get Milchick in a bar, let him have a few drinks, and just let him fucking spill. I
Yeah.
want to hear how he
Yeah.
actually.
Can you imagine like a scene of him and Natalie going to get a drink
Oh my God, that would be
and
great.
talking about like white corporate culture?
Yeah, the only time we see them talking is at Lumen, where they can't express themselves, and the unsaid has a lot of power in that
Yeah.
scene
And that was
too, but
actually powerful.
it was powerful, But then what do they do with it by the end? He gives himself this pep talk like grow up, grow, grow. Cool, great acting by Tremel Tillman. But in the final episode, he's basically leading the Kendrick Lamar Super Bowl halftime show. Plus, he's doing this kind of like this weird two-man ventriloquist dummy stand-up
Oh yeah, that was
comedy
weird.
routine, almost a minstrel show in some ways, with this animatronic Kier who is sentient enough to miss his jokes, to clap back at him,
Yeah.
to insult him, to humiliate him.
And
And then he just busts out the marching band. What is the upshot
yeah.
of all of his inner turmoil and rebellion if he's just going to become the same Milchick that he was, racing down the hall trying to stop Dylan from holding the OTC together at the end of season one? I'm like, great stuff you did with him, but what are the
What's the
consequences?
point?
And there's just a lot of lack of consequence.
Yeah, that's a good way of saying that. Um, I was gonna say so many things and I just forgot. What did you just say?
I was just talking about Milchick's his struggle, but the fact that it doesn't really seem to result in any sort of different choices, and he takes all of his
Yeah,
frustrations out on this child. Who? What's the
right.
upshot of that? He just sends her away.
Oh, I mean, I think something that was like a thread that I thought was powerful with his character is that, however much you try, however much you try to fit in, to do the right thing, da, 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 like you're just never going to be enough for Lumen.
Yep,
So that was like clearly portrayed. And I thought the performance review was actually really
that was great.
funny and really on
That
point.
was an example of the design really paying off. That whole handbook they give him.
Yeah. And when they brought in the race stuff, a part of me was almost expecting the kind of DEI culture of corporate culture where they, do all these. And I thought that would be really interesting to like, but I think you're
I
right.
guess
They
the
actually
portraits were their version of DEI.
totally, but it almost like would have been interesting to being like, okay, let's bring macrodime data refinement. Let's have a class about race or I don't know, like some diversity and inclusion thing. Like I think there was a lot of room to play with that, but I think you're right. I think they're actually unequipped in some ways to have that conversation or to write that kind of scene out.
How much would I have given to see Milchick at like a family cookout
Yeah, fair.
and like he's the only Lumen guy
Yeah.
and you know just his clash with where he comes from, presumably, if not, I mean, maybe his entire family was raised in Lumen for all I know, but I want to know this.
Yeah.
I want to know because otherwise we're just, I don't know, struggling to understand him. And he's such a, he's got such a mask and
Well,
that he has to have a mask.
it's also interesting because in season one, there was a lot of kind of power play between Cobell and him, and
Hmm.
he was clearly wanting her job.
Hmm.
And then it's like, okay, he finally got the job, but like kind of couldn't handle it in a way.
Yeah. And he's undone by an 11-year-old.
Right. And then you kind of see that dynamic, which Miss Wong I thought was a really weird character.
Yeah. Just weird for the sake of weird, but without much payoff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that like Milchick is someone similar to Dylan, where they actually did give more depth of character in a way and playing out more of the internal struggle.
But because we didn't get any extra insight into his larger life,
Yeah.
it didn't have much oxygen for it to really nourish our understanding
Right.
of him. We just know that he's more complicated than we thought.
Yeah, and it's interesting because this season we got more about like who actually works at Lumen. Like, there was more on the front end of that. But at the end, it started to me in some ways like a little bit humanizing this quote unquote like evil company.
Hmm.
So you could see like, okay, well, this person is doing this because of that, and that person is doing it because of that. But at the same time, the relationships between them felt very like it could have even been interesting if Milchick like called Cobell and was just like, listen, give me advice,
Seriously,
or something was missing about Lumen employee relations. Like it felt like everyone was just kind of fighting. Ooh. There goes the light. Um, ooh. Yeah, everyone was kind of fighting on Lumen, and it just didn't make that much sense. And then, and maybe that's just part of the corporation and part of what they wanted to show, that there's just like power dynamics between any group of people.
Yeah, but there's no cohesiveness to the corporation. In the first season, the board was such a presence of overarching power. We didn't
Yeah.
get much of a sense of that here. It's kind of every person for themselves.
Right. Which kind of makes it sound like, well, then how is this corporation even running?
Yeah.
And that's where it stops to feel believable, because they clearly need a team that's really aligned to be able to produce a company like this.
Yeah.
If all of them are infighting this much, like, it's just not that believable.
Yeah.
But I will say that a scene that I would have loved to see would have been Helena and Natalie going out for drinks,
Okay, fair enough.
or like being at a fancy party and
Yeah.
like talking shit about whatever. But, and especially, I think, there wasn't as much women on women conversation. I mean, there's more men characters, but like,
Did this season fail the Bechdel test?
I mean, you see Devin and Cobell talk, but I guess they're talking about Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what other women to women conversations do we see? Miss Wong.
Gemma and Devin briefly in that flashback.
Oh yeah, for like 1 second.
Yeah.
It's probably also about Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, we don't see like women talking to women.
Helena and Cobell have that face off
Right.
in the parking lot, which is completely
Yeah, that's the.
useless. We're going to get into Cobell next, but
But do you see what I'm saying
Yeah,
about
just-
Natalie and Helena's really
course.
like, and I almost kind of wanted, and maybe that's part of Helena's character is like just being completely cold and no friends. But I feel like there would have been some, it's like, okay, two kind of evil sisters or something. Just like, they all just felt too alone at the top in a way that was unconvincing for me.
yeah, you're right. Everyone in this season was isolated to the
Like
point.
Cobell's alone, Milchick is alone, Helena's alone. Like, and it's just like, how is this company running?
So let's talk about Cobell. So we've already mentioned her episode, which was again really well made, some really cool stuff, but I was just not satisfied with its placement in the season. I wasn't convinced that it needed to be its own episode.
It started and we were like, oh God, we
Yeah.
don't want to watch this.
Here we go. We just didn't learn enough. How was that information important to what happened later?
Yeah.
She was already disillusioned.
To be fair, I feel like season 2 in some ways was a filler season. Like, I feel like it's trying to set up for season 3 in a way. Like, it to watch season 2 on its own didn't feel like that flushed out. But like, if they're introducing all these things because they're trying to do something with them later, maybe I could see that point.
Yeah, but I mean, now I just feel like we're being strung along, like, because we could say, well, episode 6 was a filler, but once you get to episode 7, it'll make sense.
Well, but that's the thing, is that everything ended up feeling like a filler, and you left the episode being like, I don't really know what happened, and I don't know what's going to happen next, and how are we still moving from season 1, the last episode. Someone was saying how they actually didn't watch any of season 2 and they just watched the finale, and everything made total sense to them.
They didn't.
And I'm like,
to know they nothing.
Nothing actually mattered beyond those episodes. It was all kind of just giving you like more information about what we already know.
Yeah, fair enough. So yeah, I didn't love that episode, and previous to that episode, they basically sent Cobell out on the road. She drives off in a huff. Then we see her driving towards whatever that Salt's Neck or whatever, these weird names. She stops, she turns around, she goes back for no apparent reason. She has
Kind of like Irving being fired, then returning, then
Yeah.
fired. Like, it's
Yeah.
just like a bit
Yeah.
too much back and forth.
She has a conversation with Helena outside of the company. It's unclear to me why she thinks this is going to go any better than the previous conversation. She gets scared of something. She turns around and leaves. And that's it. And then at the end, she is helpful Cobell, but she's not helpful enough to like really explain
Yeah.
the things that if I was Mark, I would want to know.
And Mark also doesn't really ask her
No,
any
we
interest.
mentioned
She's just
that.
like, oh, is she alive? Is she not? And yeah, the fact that they did this whole like, she's alive, like cliffhanger so many times.
Why is she alive? What are they doing with her? But they can't have her say that because they want to keep us because those plot points are mysterious and important, and it just starts to become. I mean, this points to a bigger issue I had with the season, and I think I said it in part one of this video, like a lot of the stuff felt very audience conscious as
Hmm.
opposed to being true to the rules of the inner world.
Right.
Like that marching band, for instance, no reason for it except it's going to thrill the fans. A
Yeah,
lot of
you
the
made a
things,
good point about the scene, like the.
yeah, the signs that the marching band holds up. Do you know how they had to shoot that? Ben Stiller said they had to recreate a version, a facsimile of the MDR office without a roof. So they could film that from up
Yeah.
top. Like, again, look at all that trouble they went just for that shot. Why is that shot so important? No character could see
Yeah.
the composite that those placards make.
It felt more about like awing the audience as opposed to like staying loyal to like the
That's
characters.
exactly right. And then, so it's either awing the audience or making the audience go, aw, like how sweet, like sort of
And
like,
then, yeah.
or keeping the audience in the dark when there would be no reason for the characters to continue to be so mysterious.
Yeah. And I think for me, when I, in general, I don't know, maybe this is just my mind and how I grew up, but when I watch like a TV show or anything that's being done, that's there's so much money being poured into it. I'm like, why? And could it have be done differently? And it's like, I get it. Fine. Okay.
I
They're
heard that
like
every
this.
episode cost $20,000. Sorry, $20 million.
Yeah, I was like
20,000.
$20,000
Yeah.
is
No, no,
nothing.
no. I heard $20 million
Yeah.
per episode was the budget.
Damn. Yeah, and it's like, okay, fine. Maybe they just have the money. It's like the show of the year, whatever, so they can do it. But it's also like, I think this is in some ways the critique that I thought was powerful about season one is just because you can doesn't mean you should.
Yeah.
Like, and I thought that season one was such a divergence from what is already out there
Yeah.
because it kind of was like
Very disciplined.
very disciplined and very simple.
Yeah.
Like very sophisticated in its
Yep.
plot lines, but very simple. It's about people going to work and
Yep.
being disconnected from themselves. And there was something about that simplicity that drew me in.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's just like, okay, all this like spending of money and all this like, I don't know. For me, there was something that turned me off from it because now it felt just so much more removed and so much more of like, okay, now I'm just watching rich people make rich things, you know? And it's
Yeah,
like,
and the Mark and Gemma episode really cemented that for me because their lifestyle was so New York Times, NPR, soft focus, nice, fucking New England looking backyard, beautiful house, so tastefully furnished. Everything's perfect. Like you couldn't
classic
do.
liberals.
Yeah, it's a real sort of liberal fantasy of a cute couple. What makes them cute? Oh, their banter is so cute. They're both so attractive.
Their love story, I didn't think actually was fleshed out.
Oh God, no.
I didn't feel like these people really deserve to be
No.
together and love each other.
And Gemma just becomes this beautiful torture victim, basically.
Yeah.
And all she is a victim, as far as we know. There's no sense that she deliberately signed up for this. She's just, and then to end the season the way they did, with more torture for her, you can justify it however you want. I'm not playing the game of should any Mark have chosen this or that. Like,
Yeah.
to me, it's all the corporation's fault. I'm not going to put it on
Well,
one
but that's
character or
why I
another.
think it also would have been really interesting. And like maybe again it's just the feminist in me, but I'm like that's why I'm thinking of like even Helena, like what's her or Helena, sorry, I keep saying her name wrong. Helena, like what is her relationship to the testing floor?
Mhm.
She clearly knows what's being done.
Yep.
How does she feel about it?
Yep.
Is she kind of like, yes, I am in on torturing this woman and I enjoy like
Mhm.
I don't know, something like even woman on woman dynamics or
Totally.
even Helly. Does she feel like, because we could see in some episodes where Helly was just like trying to be protective in some ways of Miss Casey and like we have to save her, and kind of that. And the way that it was just like, oh, well, then it's like Helly versus Gemma. I'm like, what about their relationship to it? Like Helly being this angry, rebellious character, and I guess now she's more subdued and kind of less volatile with her emotions in season two. But like how does she feel about having a woman be under her tortured,
Yep.
especially when the end of season one she was talking about like they torture us down there
Also,
and there's a woman being tortured and she's just like
yeah.
running off with Mark. It's so not believable that that's Helly R.
Yeah. Yeah. It's believable that Mark would run off with her, but her being reduced to either
Like boy crazy.
but just boy craziness. Answer me this. This is one of these things I realized I don't understand. So Gemma was abducted by Lumen, taken, but she became Miss Casey and was
Yeah.
Miss Casey very stably for quite a while before they kicked her down to the testing floor. Was Miss Casey maybe the first innie that they created for her, and then they brought her up to the severed floor to serve? But like, why did they have her in this stable role?
Well,
I guess they must
yeah.
have. She must have lived down there, and they must have brought her up to work.
I mean I don't know. But I imagine my what I assumed was that like yeah, they were experimenting with her having different innies and Miss Casey was one of them and Cobell was the one who pushed for Miss Casey because she wanted to see if Mark and Miss Casey still had any sort
Okay,
of
well, it's
remembrance of each other.
absolutely unconscionable to me that we don't get any insight into that from Cobell once we have the chance.
Right.
All we have is, and there's so many scenes of just like Cobell looking at Mark, and the fire is behind her. So
Yeah,
as
that was
opposed to
like
just like, come on, like
yalla,
out
like
with
tell
it. Like
us.
it's time to spill some things.
Yeah.
It's time to solve some certain mysteries so that we can reinvest in new ones. Anyway, I feel like we're winding towards a conclusion here. I'm
Do you
kind
want
of
to say
running out
anything
of
about
steam.
Miss Wong?
Miss Wong, I thought was
Let me see if we have anything else on our list.
it felt to me like they did it for the memes. Like, oh, it's a child. Like the minute I saw that line in the trailer, why are you a child? Because of when I was born. I was like, nah, this is the wrong. That felt like it was right out of a Wes Anderson movie.
Yeah.
A kind of dry, absurdist non sequitur. And we only find out about her fellowship very, very late, just in time enough to send her packing. And she leaves.
I just don't.
And
I'm
what
still
impact does
like
she have?
so confused by why do just characters disappear whenever it just becomes too complex or something,
Yeah.
or we don't know what to do, so they just disappear.
Yeah, a
Like
lot of
it's just
characters
so
disappear.
weird,
It's true.
you
The
know?
show, the show disappears a lot of people.
Yeah. Like, I mean, and I keep thinking also to the senator and his wife and everything. And I'm
Hmm.
like, that was so interesting to also bring in like a more social, political thing. And
Yeah,
they also just, I mean, who knows? Maybe they'll come back at season 3 and
yeah.
everything. But yeah,
So that's Miss Wong for me. I don't have much to say about her.
yeah,
Drummond is a good new enforcer. They don't really deal with the death of their previous guy, Mister Whatever his name was.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, totally. He just died. And then it's like
he just
nobody.
died. I don't know how Ragabi has survived this long. She just shows up out of nowhere and then she disappears into nowhere
Yeah, like
again.
why? Like that's the thing is that I feel like all again, and I said this already, but all the new characters are at the expense of developing characters. Ragabi could have been a fascinating character to develop,
Yeah, what's her
and
background?
maybe it's like she was connected to Milchick, or clearly because she used to work at
Her
Lumen. You
and
know,
Cobell have something, but she runs away the first time she hears Cobell's name.
everyone just runs away.
Yeah,
I guess it's a show about dissociation, so that's part of it.
yeah. But
But
anyway,
yeah, I wanted to just say one thing about Cobell. Did you feel? Did you want to say anything about the goat people, or you were just like whatever?
no. Well, just that. What a kind of nothing goat burger there. That why are they raising all of these goats so that one of them will be
Yeah,
sacrificed when Mark
like a
completes
biblical
Cole Harbor?
slaughter.
Like that to me was a pretty weak.
And why? Why does a goat need to be sacrificed? Like,
Yeah.
even if that's the case, like, what's the meaning of a goat? Like, just felt like too many symbols or too many, or even like in that last painting
Yeah.
when Mark, like, why is
Well,
Devin in it? Like, there's
yeah,
just too many
Devin
confusing.
and Rickon's friends are in it.
Yeah.
Again, that mural in that last episode felt like it was for the fans.
Yeah.
If you're a completist, if you're a Severance fanatic, look, everyone's there, like a little perk for watching closely as opposed to what would actually happen in
Yeah.
the show itself. And yeah.
I did see somewhere that some people speculating that Cobell is actually Helena's mother. But that did make me question because I'm just, and maybe this is just at this point I'm just repeating it, but I'm like, why do we not see more of Helena? Like all of season one was building for this big reveal, and then it was just like, okay, she's just this character that somehow is interested now in Mark, and that becomes her.
Yeah,
But
she's
like, what happened to who's her mother? How does she feel about her dad?
yep.
Like we see glimpses of that, but or even like why does he come and talk to Helly on the severed floor, and what was the purpose
Well,
of
there and
that?
they and that's now that's the I recognize that as often in the last episode of a season they'll drop something.
But that was in episode 9.
True, it concludes in episode 10. The scene
Yeah,
concludes in
yeah.
episode 10, and it's when he says to her, I see care in you. So that kind of thing.
Which is like, are you
I,
sure? Because now she's just boy crazy over Mark.
right. Well, he sees her spunk. He sees her
But her
fire
spunk
in
is
that.
not even there
Right.
anymore.
Well, except when she calls him fucking weird and says,
Yeah, that was like
you
a,
know, you created hell and
or she's
you're
trying to
gonna go
rally up the marching band.
whatever.
She's giving a class organizing speech.
Yeah, to a bunch of people who
Like,
I just cannot believe that these severed employees exist.
yeah,
I just
like
can't believe that they
that
have a whole
many.
department of like
Well, they
the
don't have
only
to be severed. They might have just,
well, then why is
okay.
she lecturing them about how they
Yeah,
give us
fair.
half a life? And they're looking around like, oh, you're right.
Yeah, yeah,
Like, are you
yeah.
telling me they got this many like POC people
Yeah.
to sever themselves? And like they put out an ad in the local paper like all musicians of color were offering a
Come
special
support
promotion, right?
Milchick.
Come, yeah, we need you to come be a and bring your instruments. Anyway, there's more and more that we could say, but
Yeah.
to quote a movie we recently saw, The Last Black Man in San Francisco. For anyone who's thinking we're being too harsh, you don't get to hate something unless you love it. And we love this show, and I don't think we hated the season, but it did bring up a lot of
No, I didn't
frustration.
hate it. I think I just felt disappointed. I
Yeah.
think season one created such depth and such rigor in plot line and characters in a way that's so unusual for TV because usually TV is just like whoever's running it just does whatever they want and everyone goes along for the ride. And yeah, I think that there was just like some disappointment of like, oh, really? You made that choice? You made this choice? Like, not enough. Now I'm like trying to now I'm gonna do the Helly speech of dignity for the characters.
They gave them half a life and then they just
Yeah,
made them disappear.
literally.
To me, it's all summed up in the Mark Gemma episode, and in this one shot in particular that everyone online was freaking out about, and Ben Stiller was shouting out the cinematographer director Jessica Lee Gagne for it. When they go from the replay of Miss Casey saying, "I'm here to observe Heliar," which is like a callback to season one. And then the camera tips this way and then goes down through the floor and follows these cables all the way down to the
Oh
testing
yeah, yeah.
floor or whatever. And you know what we found out on Twitter? There was no CGI used. That was an actual practical effects shot. They set up this rig where the camera actually descended down these cables, and it was one shot. And I was sitting there being like, I could not care less. You could have animated it with Pixar and like it would have meant the same to me. But a lot of people were just so blown away by that. I'm like, you have lost what makes this show special if like a trick shot like that
Mm,
with very little emotional impact um, is enough is the selling point.
yeah.
So we want less technical wizardry. Definitely, we want. I mean, because of course the filmmakers will be watching this video and taking every single one of our advice.
Well,
Don't lose your creativity. Don't stop thinking outside the box. Absolutely, but don't lose the containment field either. The discipline, the structure, the rules of the world. That if you're going to break them, deal with the consequences of breaking them rather than just like, oh, what would be really cool is to do an episode like this and then just rearrange the plot so that you can go do that kind of episode, which is how this season felt.
Yeah. And we didn't really talk so much about Gemma and the testing floor, but just to say that that was just so god awful to watch.
Oh, it's
And
hard.
just, yeah, I mean, the torture and then also relationship with the race and medical experimentation and, but
Very
like
likely sexual abuse.
sexual, yeah, totally. It was just so, um, it was really, really hard for me to stomach. And also that yeah, I don't know. There's something also for me that feels really icky about having an episode devoted to like her torture in this like underworld under this severed floor. And then in some ways, Mark liberating her and then throwing her out. And then she's like screaming as like even more torture.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's something for me as an audience member that it feels a bit like not okay with that. And I know it's like in some ways like okay, just a fake world of this and that. We're just watching it, but I'm just like, you're bringing a woman of color. You're telling us to watch her being tortured.
Yeah.
The whole season is about saving her,
Yeah.
and then you give her that god awful ending. And maybe part of it was just like to really exaggerate that, but I don't know. I can't help but also feel that sometimes entertainment also really gets off at especially POC people, like kind of exoticizing their pain in a way. And yeah, that's part of why it also felt like a poor choice. It's like give her more dignity as opposed to being like this empty character that's just like lost and hidden and mysterious, having one episode where she has a life. But yeah, it just felt very
Might have been fun.
unfair to her.
Might have been fun to see her accidentally kill Drummond as opposed to Mark. Although I loved that moment in the elevator with a gun. Like that was one of the funniest moments in the
Yeah, that was a
finale
good moment.
after all of that ultra violence. Like it was great. And the what they did with um Mark and Gemma, Mark and Miss Casey kissing in the elevator and the switching from floor to floor and the waking up out of it was really all really cool. I'm with you. I thought that that Gemma, there was some trauma porn going on with
It's
Gemma,
trauma porn.
you know,
It just felt
and
very yucky.
and all the memories of her are just wistful and moody, and she's pregnant and she's miscarrying and she's beautiful, but she's not that interesting,
Yeah.
except she's only just she's someone to whom things happen,
Yeah.
and then someone who someone else remembers, and they're going to have to do more with her next season if they don't want to if they don't want to face the wrath of us doing another one of these after season three.
Well, that just felt important to say
I'm
because
glad you said it.
um well, thank you for listening. If you listened this far, thank you.
If you watch this far, what's wrong with you?
No, maybe consider getting severed. No. But yeah, let us know your questions or comments and what you agree and disagree. And if there's fan interest, maybe we'll do another one because we actually love talking about it.
We're always talking about it anyway, so we might as well.
Yeah, we're here for the discussions. And
Yeah,
yeah, I think it's cool to have a TV show that yeah, brings so much discourse into the public space, you could say.
and the feelings of disappointment that we have wouldn't be there if the ceiling for the show wasn't so high.
Yeah, true.
And if it, I mean, we have to just give them enormous credit. They created an entire world in which these kinds of deep questions about selfhood
Yeah.
and about love, which we care about less, but you know, can be asked, and it's just it's a huge accomplishment, and
Yeah, and
we send them blessings for a great third season.
we got super invested in the characters. The characters are really, really beautiful, and we just want more of them.
Yeah,
We want more depth of them. But yeah, we will definitely be watching season 3,
indeed. And until then, we'll be
making YouTube videos.
yeah, and playing the theme song on the piano.
Oh, true.
Yeah. Do, 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 do. All right, 5-1.
Bye.